Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images. As you may know, I do an awful lot of printer reviews, printer testing, paper testing, and all things like that. And a question I'm regularly asked is, what's the best printer? Well, I've done videos before about the concept of the best printer and how it means how long is a piece of string. There is no such thing. But in this video, I'm going to mention what I consider to be the best printer currently available if you are looking to get into printing a little bit more seriously. Now, I'm not talking about cheaper, lower end printers, plenty of those. I've covered some like that, but this is more expensive, yes, but some of the factors as to why I reckon that there is a fairly clear standout from a lot of people's point of view. And I'm going to look at quite a few printers and why they may actually be better for you. But of course, the real thing is you need to know what your own requirements are, what you want to get out of it. And what is the number one worry that people ask me about when they're after getting a printer? That's actually very revealing in a way as to what's the best for it. Anyway, the answer, as I've said, is always it depends. And that goes back to, I've been writing reviews and doing videos now for the last few years. I started them in 2020 at the behest of someone from Canon, actually, so thanks there. I've been doing these videos for nigh on 20 years. So not the videos, the reviews for 20 years, much less for the videos. And I've always had a very clear review policy. That is to look at a product. What does it do? Give any limitations as it applies to my using it, but to try and present as clear a picture of what the thing does, what you might use it for, and things like that, and then leave it to you to make up your own mind. Now, I do answer questions by email and comments on videos now, but in general, I'm not going to tell you which one you should buy. I don't sell printers. I have no interest whether you buy a Canon printer, Epson printer, any other printer at all. My interest is that I think printing makes a real contribution to many people's photography skills. Not everyone doesn't. I'm not saying it's a universal, it's a panacea, it will fix your photography, but learning to print, very important. But I've got videos about stuff like that, looking at things. So if I'm looking at kit, and this goes for cameras as well, I recently looked at GFX 100S, which this is the Mark II version, and said that for my uses of it, it was no good. Similarly, Canon's new R5 Mark II, stupendous, a bit of kit, all the features and things, but for what I use it for as an architectural industrial photographer, doesn't really benefit that much. Now, there are many audiences it will benefit that, but always remember that if I'm doing any review, I'm always looking at it a bit through the lens of would it be useful for me, and I don't do comparative reviews. To do comparative reviews properly is very difficult. To do it in a meaningful, accurate manner. And so I just don't. I will make comparisons occasionally, but not as much. You won't get best recommendations. Well, apart from this one, perhaps. But even though that comes with lots of caveats. So anyway, what's in the running? Well, I've got a few printers I've looked at here. This is a Canon PRO-200, or it might be a 300. They look very similar without checking the picture here. One's dye-based ink, one's pigment-based ink, and immediately, if you absolutely want pigment-based inks, that pushes you in a certain direction. And I'm going to say not in the direction I'm necessarily suggesting that you might want to start out with. Not as a complete beginner, but getting into printing seriously. Anyway, that is pigment ink, dye ink, whether it's 200, 300, very good. Excellent paper handling. The paper handling on these two printers is very good. Goes to for the Pro-1000, the bigger 17-inch version, a few years old. I'll have a few words about that at the end, about its replacement, which I'm fairly sure is coming up now. But anyway, other printers. Here's me sitting by a P5000. That's this big P5000 here. the version of this I would currently suggest, if you absolutely want a really, really good printer that does roll paper, does all sorts of stuff, the P5300 or 5370 in the US. It's expensive. The inks, well, because they're in bulk carts, they're cheaper, but it's still, you know, you don't do something like this casually, just think, I'm going to get into printing, I'll buy myself a P5370 or something like that. People do, and it's also part of the reason why I do bespoke one-to-one training in stuff like printing, teaching people how to get the best out of printers like this. Oh, and big printers like this. This is an Epson P8500, another one with me sitting next to it looking slightly suspicious, and that one, great, but look at the size of it. I'm assuming that people are going to be quite realistic about what they want in the way of sizes and things for this. But anyway, so that's a big one. What about something like this? I say A3 plus you really need to start at. This was a Canon G550 ink tank printer. Ooh, cheap inks. But it's A4 only. And I find that, I think that if you get into printing, you will quickly find that you want to occasionally, maybe at first, produce just that bit bigger printer than 8.5 by 11 A4. You want to go up a bit, and I'm not talking about stuff about this size and things like that, but you want something a bit bigger. However, the Canon range here, and this doesn't apply to the 200, 300, 1000, whatever, these ones here on Max, and I use Max for everything, colour management is completely broken on these. Now, I've got in my G550 review a way of working around it and things, but it is an imperfect workaround. Yes, I did it as a bit of a challenge to prove I could actually get decent colour prints out of this. G550, 650, various other models in that range. Yes, it's workable, but it's the size of it, and for me, for Max, the size of the colour management there, that lets it down. So we've not got that. As I already mentioned, the 200, 300, they are good, but small ink cartridges. The cost of inks in these is a significant amount. Now, it may be that your hobby, your photography hobby, has a big enough budget not to worry about the costs of these, in which case printers like this and the larger Epson P700, 900 for 17-inch, but certainly the larger, for A3 plus, the P700, that's Pigment ink. You're going up in quality here, but at a cost. It's not until you get to the much bigger printers that the ink costs start to come down again because of the size of the ink cartridges. So, P700, expensive ink costs. This, well, I'm going to say if you want something like this or equivalent, say a P7500, Pro-2600, the 2600, the new Canon ones, which a look at the Pro-2600 versus 2100 features is always worthwhile for those of you wanting to know what's going to change between the Pro-1000 and whatever might replace it. But you've got big printers like this. Yeah, they have their place, but I'm going to say not here. So what does that leave us with? Well, I don't think if you've studied any of my videos, articles, things, you're going to have a great deal in guessing that my current recommendation as the best printer to get into printing is the Epson ET8550. It is a hybrid ink set in that it has a pigment black and dyes. Now that some people have said, oh, it's a bit of a mishmash, that's a problem. No. Understand, and this is where you'll need to check the videos I've done about it and things, understand the importance of paper choice and profiling, and you will see that it's capable of excellent results. Now, the example I've got here, this is it where I scanned, it's got a scanner in it as well, where I scanned some watercolour artwork and produced cards. It's good enough for that. Now, does it have any downsides? Well, yes, any printers have downsides. In this, the paper handling, nowhere near as robust here as the Pro-300, Pro-200. Some media, some printers, you get thicker media, you'll get marks on the paper. Now, if that happens straight away when you open your printer and you get that the grooves, marks on the paper from the printer using an Epson paper, because when you contact Epson support, they will want to know that you were using an Epson paper, then those grooves get the printer replaced. I had one that had some marks on it. It was faulty in other ways. It had been dropped in transit. The one here that I'm testing, and that I got details in the review, that one didn't leave marks on the papers. Incidentally, you can put board through it as well. So it's got a straight through print path. It's got all sorts of things in it. Why have I picked something and said this is the one to get? It's very simple: cost of ink. In looking at all the stuff, I've had people ask me questions over recent years, and specific questions about printers I've reviewed in the videos. The one recurring theme is always, how much does the ink cost? Now, I pointed when I said about the 300 here and the 200 and the P700, that if you'd got a big enough budget and you weren't worried about ink costs, then you're not worried about ink costs. But the reality of it is, and this is based on, say, lots of people asking me about it, is that people find that the relatively low ink costs of an ink tank printer, that's one that actually has colour management, hint, hint, Canon, that an ink tank printer like this works really well, and they don't worry about the ink costs. And when you don't worry about the ink costs, you're much more likely to go, well, hang on, I'm not sure whether I like this setting or this setting best. I'll do 2 prints. Now, you don't have to do prints at A3 plus size just because it's a big printer. Do your prints on A5 or something like that if you're testing and you want to save money on paper as well. But you're not worrying about the ink costs. What you're doing is actually just having a go and going, well, actually, I've printed this. You know, Fred X on some forum somewhere said I should use this particular technique. However, Keith in one of his videos says do this. Let's print the 2 and actually look. Oh, what a surprise. The method that Keith suggested works. Doesn't always. Test. I always say any of these things I talk about, printer detail, colour management and stuff, always test it. Now, the A500, I've got lots of profiles. I just generated over 25 profiles for it when I did it. See the notes for that if you're interested in stuff like that. But that's what it comes down to. Yeah, that is the best one for when it comes to actually doing prints relatively cheaply. Now, of course, you're going to have to pay for paper and stuff like that. But that's a printer that I've happily recommended. And I've had lots of people saying how much they've got into printing more once that concern over ink costs. Quite often, I'm going to say, it wasn't necessarily that real a concern, but it's just at the back of the mind, oh, I'm wasting ink here doing this. Whereas with this, well, yeah, you could say you're wasting ink, or you could say you're learning something by actually trying something yourself and testing it out. And that makes a big difference, because that actually goes for any of these printers. But I did say this was the best for a relatively specific but quite large proportion of people, photographers getting into printing. So if you want bigger stuff, well, I mentioned about those. I also mentioned the replacement for the Pro-1000. Now, I still do not for certain know this, so take this with a pinch of salt. But as far as I'm concerned, I reckon by the end of the year, you will not be able to buy a Pro-1000, just the replacement. And as I hinted at earlier, if you want to see the most significant changes between the Pro-1000 and whatever comes out next, let's call it a Pro-1600 because of the large format changes. If you want to see, it could be anything. Canon's numbering just varies on the whims of marketing. But if you want to see look at the specifications of the Pro-2100. That's the 24-inch printer, almost identical to Pro-2000 I reviewed a few years ago. The 2 are virtually identical. And look at the specs for the new 2600. The key difference is in inks. You're going to see a different formulation of ink and some better colours in terms of longevity and lifetime. So if you're looking for your prints lasting a long while, I did something about print longevity recently, if that matters to you, and it doesn't have to matter to you, if that does, then you're probably going to find interesting things in the Pro 2600 specifications. Do I think the new printer will have roll paper? No. I'd be surprised if it did. I've been surprised before, but there you go. Anyway, I hope that's of interest. Please do ask some questions. I put links to all the reviews of these printers in the notes to the video. The videos, the links themselves are the written articles, but each one of those has a list of all the relevant videos I've made. So if you go to the 8500 written review, you'll find all the videos, well, 8550, 8500 is the small version, 8550. So if you go to that, you will find a complete list of all the videos I've made concerning that, and a list of the papers I tested and all the stuff like that. Anyway, I hope that was worthwhile. Thanks very much for watching, and as I say, if you've got questions, let me know. Thanks again. Bye.